Well, hello and good evening. Welcome to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
So happy to have you along. And you may be wondering what in the world you're doing watching a financial education program on your Tuesday evening or whenever you happen to be watching this video. Well, it just so happens that after teaching at Purdue University for 7 years and doing a radio show for 20 years, we combined the two, the financial education and the radio show, to bring you ideas and thoughts about things that may be providing financial regrets in your future, if you will. Events that occur, whether it's the loss of a job, the marriage of a child, what to do with things that are going on in your financial life. We provide checklists and education that you can use as an actionable plan to be able to take out. Now, we're going to ask you to call Angi at some point in time at 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. Angi, it's pretty simple, isn't it?
It is. Give me a call.
And Angi will walk you through the things that you need to be able to bring to be able to come in to see our team. In the meantime, we're going to get ready to have a great show tonight. So glad to have you along. If you've got a question or comment, you can email us at considerthis@yourlifeafterwork.com. Go to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com. Of course, give Angi a call at 800-928-4001. Now, on to the show. Well, good morning and welcome to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark. So happy to have you along. So first and foremost, we've been doing this radio show for a little over 22 years. Obviously, the digital technology for you to see the video has not been around that long, but you can watch us live anytime you would like by going to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com. Find us there. Or, of course, you can always find us on our Facebook page, the Financial Enhancement Group. And our special group for you listeners is the Tidbits page. So Financial Enhancement Group, Tidbits page. Now, I created this program years ago because I understand the reality of life. And that's that you don't wake up in the middle of the night and go, I think I should see a financial planner. What happens in our lives are we reach these experiences, these moments of where now something has changed. We call them triggers and transitions. It could be retirement that you've chosen on your own. And sadly enough, it could be retirement that you didn't choose on your own. It could be a job change, a marriage, an inheritance. Those kind of things happen. Our job is to make sure that you are prepared for those as much as you can possibly be. We help reduce financial regrets at the Financial Enhancement Group. That's what we do. We take care of people who, quite simply, don't want to worry about their money. Now, that may or may not be you right now, and it may or may not be you in the future. But in the meantime, we are going to do our best to use this show to educate you about things that we think you really need to consider. We do that by looking at a program or a process that I put together when I taught at Purdue University. It's called the Family Focus Process. It starts with you, your vision, where you really are today and where you want to go. That way my team makes sure that we stay on the same path. We then look at the 5 critical elements, 5 areas that I believe have the individual ability to destroy your financial future. And yet at the same time, as long as we get those 5 right, we're going to get it right. Now, James Clear, one of my favorite authors, likes to remind us that success is never dependent upon one habit, but failure can be. And I will tell you, after 32 years as a professor at Purdue, as a certified financial planner, you miss one of these 5 things: your life after work, or what some people call retirement planning, annual tax planning, the investment playbook, life happens, the good and bad and ugly of life, and the legacy plan. You miss one of the 5 and everything else can be for naught. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. I want to remind you there are 2 tax codes in the United States, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. Stick around, join the best of this, consider this program. Angi and I will share some insights with you that we've experienced over the last years. 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
Happy to have you along. All right, Angi, you can go ahead and read the question.
Okay, we had a question that said, I'm reaching out to get your advice on the best way to set up a business from a tax perspective. And it said, Jill and I are starting a home building business as a side business to build a couple of homes a year while maintaining my full-time position at Purdue University in construction management. We have drafted a business plan and are working through those steps. Any other advice that you could provide would be greatly appreciated. And I hope you're doing well. I'm not going to say who it's from.
I appreciate that. It's a great question, and the key thing here, I think, when you break this down, and just to reward the good behavior. One, these are very smart people that are taking the time to ask questions of people that they know have more experience at doing that than them. Notice he didn't ask me how to build the house. He didn't ask me how to buy the house. He didn't ask me about. He did ask about the business plan. That's true, but he's got a business plan that's put together. They've communicated. Notice it wasn't just him. They are on the same page, and they've got experience with this. But now it's time to open up a company. So when you open up a company, and this is what I shared with him, the tax perspective is one thing, right? So for most people, you're either going to own an S corporation, or you're going to own what's called an LLC, limited liability company. Could be a limited liability partnership as well, but
Could you be a sole proprietor?
You could be a sole proprietor, but when that happens, you lose the liability, right? The liability protection. So, the FEG building, right?
Yeah.
Is in a different company. It's in an LLC. It's not in the name of the Financial Enhancement Group. So if somebody's walking down the road, cutting through our yard to get to the place of a business behind when they ever get back to work, right? And they get hit in our lot, when they go to sue somebody, they're going to sue the building company, not the Financial Enhancement Group, right? So we've got liability in this case protecting a company. But let's say we had all of it together, having the LLC, if everything is done correctly and there's not intentional negligence, it gives you a layer of protection from getting to the rest of your assets. Now, both of those, the S corp, the sole proprietorship, the family, the LLC, all three of those are what's called pass-through entities. And what that means is a pass-through entity. It means, hey, this is money that flows right through to your tax return. So an interesting thing that will happen, Angie, is I've seen people, and I get it emotionally and I get it mentally, but somebody will walk in and they'll tell me that they've got $300,000 in their IRA and $200,000 in another account, but I know they have a business. And I go, okay, so you've got $500,000, $300 that's tax deferred, $200 that's your money, and then well, I've got $750,000 in the business account, but that's business money. Right? And in their mind, they have separated it from the rest of their money. And then I'll ask how the company is owned, and they'll tell me it's an S corp or an LLC. And what I explain to them, you may have separated that $750,000 from the way you want to look at it, but the IRS ain't buying it, right? You've paid taxes on that $750,000 already because it's a pass-through entity. So you don't have to call your CPA to ask if you can take money out of it. If you're going to make a distribution to yourself, you make a distribution to yourself. You've already paid the taxes on it, and you really want to make sure that you're getting that money to work. We'll have people who try to open up business accounts as brokerage accounts, and if Angie and I were partners, and we were going to have and we were going to open up a brokerage account together, that might make sense. But for a husband and wife to do that, or for an individual to do that, really, really doesn't make any sense. So, in their particular instance, what I recommended that they did was an LLC. Could have just as easily been an S corp, but I recommended they did an LLC. Right? It's gonna throw through their right through their tax return. It's a pass through. It's going to give them liability protection from other assets that they have. That's not perfect protection, but it is better than what's out there. A lot of people don't follow the rules. I have a minutes book, where we actually have meetings. I used to meet with myself, and I'd have to jot down notes of changes that I made or things that are in there in order for it to be legal and legitimate. You've got to have that. You got to have those meetings. So that's where we go.
So they've already done the business plan, and what about funding their new business? What are the different ways you can do that?
Well, and just as I said, it's a pass-through entity, and you can pull money out of the business account anytime you want. You can also put money into it.
Yeah.
Because it's still, it's got a different number, a different what's called TIN, taxpayer identification number, than your Social Security number, but it's still going to go to your tax return. So sometimes we'll see people who will go to a bank and say, hey, I want to make a $250,000 investment in a building or in equipment. And the bank says, well, you've got to contribute 20 or 30% down, and we'll loan you the rest. Even though the money may have not gone into the business, you're still looking at that as a business asset.
Does an SBA loan work that way?
Well, an SBA loan, a Small Business Administration loan, is always going to be, there's going to be some recourse that's there. The bank is a little more protected. The interest rate is typically a little higher than what you would pay if you could get your own loan from a bank. But the Small Business Administration is, again, as long as you follow the rules, is going to help finance or part of that debt, if you will, to take it off the bank's shoulders so that you can get the money to get started. That's a loan, though. That's not capital, right? You're borrowing the money, and believe me, the SBA or Star Financial or First Merchants or whomever are going to ask the question, "What's the money for?" Right? They're not in the habit of just handing out accounts.
Well, that's another route you could go too, is getting venture capital from investors.
Yeah, absolutely. People, and there's a lot of that goes on in what's called intra-family lending, where your daughter's 18 and is going to Ball State, and she finds a place that she wants to buy. We have a lot of families that have bought their kids' apartments while they were at university because they consider it to be good investments. I did not do that. Don't plan on doing that. I do not know how to fix anything. I am good with 5 critical elements: your financial vision and next steps meetings. I am not good at knowing how to fix things. There would be a lot of duct tape laying around and not a good plan. But a lot of people do that, and yes, you can get a loan. But that is one case. We've got a family in Lafayette that's over $40 million of assets. And when I first met them, they had an LLC, and I said, why would you have 30 properties, and have it all in one LLC? I mean, that you're taking every one of those places has the ability to put the other ones at jeopardy. And so now I think we settled on 12 LLCs. So things got divided up, that made it a little more reasonable. You don't want to have 100 LLCs unless you've really got a lot of money and got somebody else to take care of running the minutes and doing all the other stuff. But they are great things to consider. And this is one of those things, folks. If you go to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, when we talk about the 5 critical elements, right? The Your Life After Work, the annual tax plan, the investment playbook, and then life happens. Those things that you're not prepared for. The last one, of course, is legacy planning. But when that life happens things, these are things that are going to happen to you maybe once or twice in your life that we have to deal with pretty much on a monthly basis. We take care of right at 1,100 families now. And I've done it for 32 years. So we've got a lot of experience, but we don't even want to start to have to think things through. When he asked me this question, my first question to somebody in our team was, do I have a checklist already created for starting a business? The answer was no. So I went through and I said, here's things that I want to consider for him to be able to start a business from the tax perspective. And it's going to my planning team where there's another 5 minds of experience and degrees in financial planning and so forth. And I'm going to ask them, hey, what did I leave off of this checklist? Right? So that you're able to go get that when you have these conversations or these discussions. You don't have to start from scratch, right? You go to our website, you put in your email, get on our list, and you can download a checklist to be able to help you with a particular thing.
Brett Spangler, who's a CPA in our office, had a comment, and he said it's important for the LLC to act like a business, meaning not to commingle personal and business expenses to preserve liability protection.
That's absolutely true, Brett. Great point. And it happens all of the time where, when I have a farm family, for instance, that says that they're going to sell the family farm, and I remind them that there's probably a lot of things they've got used to paying for. Like I will ask them, when was the last time you paid for a gallon of gas that was not out of the farm tank, right? I mean, it's those things that you don't think about. So it's very easy to happen. But Brett, great point. You do need to keep that money separated, or the expenses separated, so that you've got something to give to Brett or whoever does your taxes to be able to prove that this really is it. And you do have to function as a business. There are people who have LLCs that don't do anything. That makes sense either.
The only other question, I mean, how does it impact your tax return to have both self-employed income and W-2 income? Because as he said, he was going to keep his full-time job.
So the W-2 income is what happens when you work. So in his case, Purdue, right?
Okay.
He gets that Purdue takes money out of his check every time that they get paid, twice a month, as I remember. I was a professor there for 7 years, but it's been 7 years. It's hard to believe. No, it's been 5 years. That's not true. I think it was twice a month that we got paid. Anyhow, there's 7.65% that is taken out for Medicare and for Social Security, and Purdue puts in 7.65%. If you are a self-employed person, you have the lucky benefit of being able to pay both sides, right? So it doesn't really impact the way that it works. I mean, there's a cap on the amount you have to pay in for the Social Security part. There's no cap on the Medicare part. Mm-hmm. This is one of the things where there's a holiday. 2020 is just the asterisk year where we didn't have money withheld on people's checks. In many, many cases. And they call it a tax holiday. President's still pushing for it again. There's some businesses that are already doing it, others not so much. All right.
Okay.
Hey, don't forget to get signed up for your Next Steps meeting and get those checklists. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Give Angi a call, 800-928-4001. Happy to have you along. The Next Steps meeting, 90 minutes with one of our planners. It's complimentary. It's important. We're happy to have you in. We'll take a break and be right back. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
And if you wonder why we're saying good morning and it's 5 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, the answer is very, very simple. We stream this live on Tuesday nights, 5 to 6 p.m. for you. Happy to have you along on that for that live engagement and being able to ask the questions and interact. But it still airs on a bunch of radio stations across the country on the weekends, on Saturdays and Thursdays and Sundays. So whenever you're listening to it, we're thankful that you're here and we're hoping that we are helping you reduce financial regrets. That is our job and our goal. So most of what I talk about on this show comes from one of three places. Either Angi's creative mind, your questions and comments, or things that I saw that happened over the course of a week. And I go, those are really good questions. Mm-hmm. This was one of those cases. Somebody reached out to me and said, Joe, I'm going to be 30 and I'm getting ready to get married. And what do I need to be considering? Right? Yeah. So go ahead, Ange.
So one of the questions is, when do you need, now we don't have prenups here in Indiana.
Sure we do.
Oh yeah, we do.
We do.
We don't have.
What we don't have is alimony.
Yes.
And you can still use alimony. We just don't, it's not a fixed part of our world.
Right, it's not forced.
But a prenuptial agreement is an agreement that two people have prior to marriage. Again, it has to be prior to marriage. Please keep in mind, regardless of what your attorney tells you, and I'm not practicing law, I'm practicing tax code now. There is a difference. Attorneys will tell you that a prenuptial agreement will hold up for a 401k or a 403b, and they will not. If your spouse or ex-spouse takes that to court, they will lose. Department of Labor unequivocally says that you cannot do that. Now, you can have a post-nuptial agreement. This is the only thing. So Angi and I get divorced. I can have Angi sign off, or after we're married, I can kiss the bride. After we're married, she can sign off and say that she's no longer the beneficiary of my 401k. But other than that, your spouse is the beneficiary of your 401k. I don't care what you get on that document or the prenup. But the prenup just simply lists all the assets that you have ahead of time. This is one any attorney, well, I shouldn't say any, but attorneys can help you with. We can't, or we don't practice law by any stretch of the imagination, but attorneys can help you put it together. Again, by letter of the law, you should each have counsel. Right, so you should have an attorney, I should have an attorney, and it only protects all of the listed assets. So if I try to hold out on you about the Swiss bank account, right, and you find out about it later, it is suddenly a marital asset. So it is an important thing, and it's one that people talk about. I don't think it's the most important conversation.
Well, opposite of the marital assets, when we get married, will I take on my new spouse's debt?
You will if you signed anything. So this is where it gets to be very, very interesting. In the United States, we cannot put other people in debt, including our kids. A lot of times kids get panicked when they see parents take on debt. You are never responsible for somebody else's debt unless your name is on that application. However, all of their assets are there to protect those debts, right? So if you looked at our situation, if I had $1 million in assets, Angi, and you weren't necessarily attached to the debt, but I died, it doesn't mean you get the $1 million without the debts being taken care of. Make sense? There is a little bit of a difference there. It's a, so you have to understand how both of those situations play out.
Well, also, if you don't have to, if you're not responsible for the debt because you didn't sign, I'm talking about like say a student loan, they would still use your income though to qualify your household on whether you could get a student loan.
Student loans are dirty. I mean, they're just messy because it is some of the stuff is based on my household income, and yet I'm not on the debt, right? So it's a little bit different.
You kind of answered this. If only one of us has a savings account, will it belong to both of us after we're married?
It is a marital asset depending on what the judge says at the time of divorce. Now, what we're taught in school is as long as you didn't pull money out of that savings account to be able to take care of our daily functioning, our normal process, that most of the time it's protected. Most judges would tell you the same thing if you inherited a bunch of money from your parents and then I decided to get divorced and take it away. If we never used that money to pay the house payment, the car payment, to be able to buy groceries, that it's protected. But I've also seen cases where that is not the case, right? So you can't, you can say this is a general rule. You can't say that's a specific rule without having to go to court there. But there's other questions that I don't think that I think people forget to ask.
This one's about real estate. It says each of us owns our own home and plan to be married. If we sell my fiance's home and decide to live in mine, do I need to add him to the deed? What happens to the money from the sale of his home since it was never in my name?
And that part of that is the agreement that you guys have going in terms of what it is you're going to do with the money. A whole host of different things can happen there, but that's where a prenuptial agreement would come into play. And it's, I mean, you do not have to put their name on the deed. We have, I shouldn't say many, but we have families where the deed is only in one person's name. And that happens. Where you should never allow happen, in my opinion, is you should never have your name on the debt and not on the asset.
True.
Right. And somehow or another that can happen every now and then. Right. So, you want to be careful there.
Also, a 30-year-old may ask, what is the first step to begin for saving for retirement?
And that's an important thing. So we're always going to talk about the accumulation phase. We're going to talk about diversification. What happened in this 30-year-old's case is he had about $300,000 of assets that he had saved. This is the youngest generation I've ever seen that has accumulated this amount of money and not very much invested in a market, right? So there are questions that Angie's a mom of a young man and a wonderful young lady. And if they ask you about getting married, there's things you would tell them to talk about. Where are we going to live? How many kids are we going to have? But there are other things that I think people forget about, right? You can, very rarely does the conversation come up when people are 20 and 21. Barb and I got married a month before I turned 22, right?
Wow.
So we weren't talking about savings. We were talking about surviving, right? I mean, that was not, we didn't have a lot of resources, right? So the idea of what percentage of our income do you think we should be saving is not one that would come up. For a 30-year-old, dadgummit, this is marriage counseling stuff, guys. Pay attention here, right? If you're committed to saving 20%, and this young man that had saved that $300,000 was and did commit to that, and all of a sudden the new spouse is coming in and you don't have that conversation, and they see 20% of the money getting saved in accounts when they go, well, why do we need the money for? What are we saving? That's not the way I was raised. It's not what I believe. Bad things can really, really happen. So you've got that side, kids, whose house we're living in, how we do that transfer, if you will. And then the old adage that I learned years and years ago, a son's a son until he takes a wife, but a daughter's a daughter for life. Make sure you understand what the family plan is going to be on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. Otherwise, you're just asking for trouble going down the road.
We had a question come in. So, our attorney told me that adding my grandson as a TOD on our house would cause a taxable event. Is that correct?
No.
No, Jim. In Montana, that is not correct.
Sorry, Jim. That adding a TOD is not a completed gift under any of the tax consequences. Now, there could be some weird law in Montana that has something to do with the exemption that you get for owning residency, but a TOD is nothing more than a beneficiary agreement. Nothing is done until somebody passes away. However, and I don't want to disparage anyone, however, what it does do is keeps that asset out of probate. And there are an awful lot of attorneys out there in the world who still practice probate law. And probate law is merely taking your asset, paying them money, and them transferring it to your grandson. So my answer from a tax standpoint on that is no, and I would love to know why I'm wrong.
Okay, here's another question. What is the best way to start saving now for when we have children who may want to attend college?
So in Indiana, if you live here, the college choice program is $529. Make sure you do not go through a broker. I got so livid. We do not make commissions. We get paid fees to manage money. And all of a sudden, I looked down 3 or 4 years ago, and we made $9,000 in commissions, and I just went ballistic. And so the college choice is divided into 2 parts. It's the easiest website I've ever seen in my entire life. If you go through a broker, they have to charge you 4.5% commission. I couldn't figure out how to get it stopped. So we had to move all of that money out of our name into your individual names. But it's an easy program. That's good for up to $5,000 per 1040. So for a husband and wife, you can put in $5,000 a year. Doesn't matter how many beneficiaries you have. You can have different plans if you need to. One plan makes it a little bit simpler. If you're not married and you've each got a 1040, you could each put in $5,000. I wouldn't put in any more than that. I don't think there's anything going to be disintermediated over the COVID virus more than healthcare other than higher education. I really believe 5 to 10 years from now, it does not look like it looks today. I would be very careful overfunding, but boy, it's hard to pass on that tax credit.
Because if you overfund, I mean, you can change the beneficiary.
It's a 10% penalty. There's no way out of it. Yeah, you can change the beneficiary.
You can change and you can move it on to another child, but if it goes unused and you don't have any more educational expenses. But now, are there some educational expenses that are a little, what about when you went to Italy?
Thank you, Angie.
Yes?
Yes, there are some creative ways. I always said if my 529 was overfunded, I want to go to Israel. I've been enrolled in AU to take seminary classes. And if AU had an educational program to go to Israel, where there are credit hours offered, I could, in theory, use my 529. We had kids who did that when I took them to Italy, to a cooking school, and to a place to understand how international trade and international currency actually work. So it's a great point, but I just want you to understand there is no exit. It's a 10% federal penalty if not used for something deemed higher education. For the first time ever, by the way, you can actually use up to $10,000 of it for student debt. That's not something that you had before as an option. She's pondering now.
I know, because it's like, which one?
Here's the deal. You want to sit down, if you're going to get married at any age, you want to sit down and ask yourself, what is every serious question that I can come up with, and make sure you're not going to agree on all of them. And don't think that somebody's not going to change their mind. But the point is, let's at least identify the questions and at least brace the topic, right? Let's broach the topic rather. Let's just make sure that we're on a similar page, not a different solar system. Hey, call Angi, get signed up for the Next Steps meeting, 800-928-4001. We'll tell you what you need to consider today, in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
Happy to have you along, Angie. All right, in the investment world, there are 2 different classifications that you see happen a lot, active and passive. Now, Angie, I know you're not a professional investor, but what do you suppose passive investing means?
I would think passive investing means you don't need to have anyone manage for you. It probably is less risky and
be careful.
Maybe not less risky, but maybe not as much fees or expenses.
Typically, they operate cheaper. That's fair.
Okay, so they're just more hands off than actively managing it.
So that's what people believe to be true. Okay. So we certainly don't want to say less risky. They do tend to have lower fees inside of them and lower transaction costs. But of course, now that we live in a world where trading is free for most of us as institutional managers. That's not an issue, but
And they're a lot more
transactions were cheaper.
transparent, maybe.
Taxes, people believe, are cheaper because there's not as much trading that goes on, right? So in an active is where you actually have a manager, somebody who is making decisions, buying and selling individual stocks or individual bonds. So you've got transaction costs. You typically have a little bit of higher expenses and everything else. So what's happened since about 2016 specifically, you've watched the S&P 500 just perform very, very, very well. In the middle of the virus is the first time where that's not been the case. It's been a handful of companies that have driven the market. That happened in 2018 as well. But overall, for people who don't know, you just look at the S&P 500 and you are told it's passive, right? Because it doesn't have a manager like a Joe or an Adam or an Andrew inside of it per se. We're going to get to that in a second. And it feels cheaper. And so people think that it's safer because it's so divided up amongst different companies, right? So I'm going to read some stuff. Andrew is our chartered market technician. And I said, Andrew, why don't you give Angi some of your thoughts on this? And here's what he wrote. The bar to call something passive is much higher than many realize. To truly be a passive investor, you need to set your portfolio allocation, then close your eyes and change your password. Beyond that, there's some sense of active management involved even in the usage of index funds. Very, very true. The S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average both are viewed as passive indices because they don't necessarily have a manager inside. However, both the Dow and the S&P 500 have changed companies this year. Since 2000, folks, 30% of the companies that are left in the S&P 500 were there in 2000, 20 years ago, right? So there's these constant movement that goes on. Sometimes it's mergers and acquisitions. Sometimes companies go private, back to public, but they're not as passive as one thinks. And he went on to say, on occasion, several times a year, does the index shake up what stocks are included? To say they aren't picking winners and losers, regardless of the reason for the change, that is still active management. And that is an accurate statement, and people really need to be aware of it. What's the next quotation, Jen? Because nearly all forms of management have some degree of active management involved, some, of course, more than others. Investors need to recognize this and understand what components of their investment allocation is being controlled by what. So we'll pause there for a second, and we'll come back to Andrew's quotation. So with the S&P 500, there's a guy named Dr. Blixer, smart fella, little beard, looks like a professor, is a professor, right? And it's his job and his committee's job to figure out what companies best go in the S&P 500. Now, about once a year, I explain to you why this index even exists in the first place. And so it's important that you get this to get the makeup of the overall thing. So back in the 50s, it wasn't the S&P 500, but back when John Bogle was beginning to build his thesis at Princeton around the concept of investing in an index. He didn't call it passive investing. He called it in an index. The S&P 500 was developed not as an investment vehicle. That was his job. The S&P 500 was commissioned to find companies that best represented the sectors of the United States economy, so that economists had the capacity to look and see if this sector was doing better or this sector was doing better, to give it a better idea of what we call a leading or lagging, depending on the situation, indicator of what an economy was doing or getting ready to do next. Bogle's then the one who primarily said, hey, we can turn this into an investment. You may remember that he recanted on his deathbed because market capitalization had gotten so far out of whack. And that's really where we are today. When you watch our market carver that we send out every Thursday, and we talk about market breadth, one of the challenges is there's not a lot of breadth in the market. It's a very segmented number of companies that are really, really driving the marketplace. Let me finish this, Angie, and then you can ask your question. Is it a group of strangers setting an index that a mutual fund that you own tracks? Is it a broker and this is talking about who it is that's setting up the index and where they're coming from. The financial enhancement group, if I want, can set up an index. We pay a fee. It can go and be set up anytime we want. All right, you can get rid of that, Jennifer. Go ahead and ask your question.
We have a question from Gary. In volatile market conditions, do you prefer an active or passive investment approach?
in volatile investments, I
in
definitely want
volatile market
I
conditions.
definitely want it to be in a volatile area. I definitely want to know what it is that I own, and very, very much need it to be a passive or an active rather thing where I can see exactly what it is that I own at the time.
Okay. And that was Gary and Anderson.
Okay, so you want me to go to the quandary then? So here's the real problem. When we talk about the S&P 500, you guys use it because it's the broadest tracked index in the world, literally the world, and it's on CNBC every day. A much broader index to use is actually the Russell 1000. And the Russell 1000 is the 1,000 largest companies that are publicly traded in the S&P or in the United States stock market. So you have the Russell 2000; those are the small caps. Russell 1000 are the largest companies. Now, as a money manager, as a fiduciary, if you ever came in and read our ADV or looked at our investment policy statement, what you would find out is we are not going to have more than 5% of your money in any one company. And when it drifts above that mark, because the stock market has done so well or a particular company has done so well, we go in and trim it. We don't sell it all, but we get it back into that 5%, right? Now, Angie, you didn't know what the Russell 1000 was when I was talking to you about this. So what happens when you don't know, the only thing you can do is compare, right? Mm-hmm. And what you don't know can hurt you. Right? And so you're looking at the S&P 500 index. Well, how did Joe do compared to that? Or the Russell 1000. Well, how did Joe do compared to that? And what you don't understand is the Russell 1000. We're talking about 1,000 companies here. 39% of it right now is in 5 companies because of market cap. So here I am as a money manager, right? I'm trying to compete with an index that you're looking at as a benchmark. Right, the S&P 500, folks, isn't much different. It's not quite 39%, but the 5 largest companies are upwards of 20% of that entire indices. This is a problem for money managers. They know you're looking at the benchmark. Most money managers like to hug the benchmark so that they're just a little bit better or a little bit worse. That especially in the larger institutions, that way everybody is happy. And there's not that big of a difference between this fund company and that fund company. But we are today in a world that I would call a stock picker's market, where if you're going to manage volatility, if you're going to manage risk, and if you're going to be a fiduciary, meaning that you don't have too much of your money in any singular position, then you're going to have to go outside of those indices, and you're going to have to figure out a process or a way to go. One of our advantages that we've always had at the Financial Enhancement Group is we're big enough to be important, but we're small enough not to make huge waves inside of the market, where you've got fund companies that are literally 30, 50, 80 billion dollars and more, right, versus 500 million and change. We're able to maneuver a whole lot quicker in this world of where you've got to be able to get in and get out of situations, Angie.
What about hedging? Can you do that in either?
You can't. I mean, what happens with when you talk about hedging, it's just think about hedging your bet. That's the way that was originally designed. And investors will try to do it in a couple ways. They'll try to hedge based on finding assets that are technically not correlated, meaning that they go in different directions. That's one kind of a hedge. Another kind of a hedge is selling a put or a call on an index that you either own or don't own. And we've talked about that, I think, a couple weeks ago on the show. You can always go back and get those off our website, by the way, at yourlifeafterwork.com. But yeah, you can use indices to hedge if that's what you would like to do.
And as far as tax management, I mean, with the latter of the two, I mean, which is the better?
There is no question. If you're looking at an index mutual fund or an index or an active traded mutual fund, you are probably going to have, especially in an up year, you're probably going to have, not guaranteed, but you're probably going to have more tax efficiency inside of the passive mutual fund. Now, again, if it's inside of an IRA or 401k, it doesn't matter, right? But the ETF, my friends, trumps both. If you're going to do it, you still want to buy an exchange-traded fund to own the passive index.
Well, Mike asks, why is investing in an index fund seen as less risky
Because people believe, Mike, great question. Because people have the illusion of believing it's divided up between 500 companies equally, and it's not. The only way to run an index fund, other than the Dow Jones, which is price weighted, the rest of them are market cap weighted, and that the size of the mammoths, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Google, right? The size has got so large that it just dwarfs the others, and so you're really investing in a very small handful of companies. There was a period of time, and this is why John Bogle recanted on his deathbed. He's the one who came up with the idea of doing this. And in 2019, October, November, somewhere in there, he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, recanted, and then died shortly thereafter. It's a great question, Mike, but that is where that illusion comes from. 800-928-4001. Give Angie a call. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. We will take a break and be right back. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angie Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angie Kinser.
We're happy to have you along. Hey, we've got a good friend of mine, Jon Braddock, and just a wonderful, wonderful human who's been through an event that changed his life, his wife's life, and now he's taken some of that strategy and ideas and is bringing it to you. So, Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you along, my friend. I'm going to turn it over to Angie and let her ask you some questions and just get the show on the road.
Well, I think where we should start is, Jon, can you fill us in a little bit about My Life and Wishes and let our audience know what that is?
Yes, absolutely. My Life and Wishes is a online, secure education, storage, and planning platform for your life. So as an example, when a person dies or passes away, there's usually a tremendous amount of work left for the family. A lot of loose ends, trying to track down insurance policies, copies of wills or trusts, other documents. More importantly today, login access and passwords to their various accounts. And without that knowledge or information, it can be a scavenger hunt on steroids that creates a tremendous amount of pain for families. So what our platform does, it allows you to store and secure all this information. So literally, if I don't make it home this evening, at the touch of a button, my family will have access to everything that they need to know.
And what inspired that? What got you to do that?
Well, interesting. As you know, Joe, I have a background in financial services area. And my wife and I had a company together in Wisconsin. And in 2013, her father, who lived about a half a mile up the street from us, passed away unexpectedly. And what ensued from that point was this scavenger hunt that I mentioned earlier, which took us minimally 10 months to get through and find everything. Ted, God rest his soul, was a wonderful man, but he was a saver. And, you know, the good news, bad news. The good news is he saved everything. The bad news, it took months to dig through that information, to finally find a will, to find the insurance policies that were still active. Sadly, we had to call numerous insurance companies from policies that we had found to find out whether or not those policies were actually even in force. And then trying to access his online presence. He was an old IBM guy, so he used the computer frequently. But we couldn't log into accounts where he did bill pay, auto draft, and those things. And as you know, most of us today don't get bills from our utility company, the cable company, in our physical mailbox. They show up in our inbox, which took an enormous amount of time to track down and log in. And
Right.
So it inspired me as I was thinking through this, that, you know, everyone is going to pass, and our lives, especially now in this digital age, have become so much more complicated. There had to be an easier way for families to access that information and do it quickly without having the added stress, frustration, and anxiety that comes along during a time when they should just be dealing with their grief.
So what's a good way for people to be able to reach out to you and to find out more about My Life and Wishes?
Oh, you bet. And as you know, Joe, I'm an open door. My email is Jon, Jon, at mylifeand is spelled out, Andy, mylifeandwishes.com. I respond to all my email when it comes from people. So if they have questions, they can reach out. They can also go to mylifeandwishes.com, where our website has a video, a slew of information, helpful resources and checklists that people can download just to help guide them.
Absolutely.
Our mission is, as you know, our mission is to help 1 million families avoid this inevitable scavenger hunt that awaits them. So we're trying to just reach out and be as helpful as we can.
This is the second time we've had Jon on the show, and it's because we find his information and his package so useful. One of the things that I do in the trust programs that we work on is work on the wish list, if you will. It's language that's added to the trust that says these are my wishes, and we make it very, very clear. So it goes well with what Jon is talking about and some of the things there. So Angi, go ahead.
Why do you think most people avoid end-of-life planning?
Well, it's interesting because I get various response when I speak to groups, and sometimes it's, well, I have time. Well, yeah, maybe you do, but I don't own that crystal ball. I don't know when my last day will be here. This is not taxes. I don't wait until the 15th of April to file those. But I think the other is that I think people are think it's a daunting process that, oh my gosh, it's going to take forever to get all this stuff pulled together and in one place, and they just tend to put it off. And so what I tell people is use a weight loss analogy when you do this kind of planning. Okay, if you want to drop 20 pounds and you go to the gym and the trainer there says, you know what, tomorrow morning you'll wake up 20 pounds lighter. You run, because that won't happen, right? Just like this, you can't have your whole digital end-of-life plan done by tomorrow morning. But that trainer back at the gym, if he said to me, he said, Jon, you want to drop 20 pounds? Here's what we're going to do. 2 months from now, you can wake up and you will be 20 pounds lighter. And we're going to do a little bit tomorrow and a little bit the next day. And each week as we go forward, and boom, it's going to happen. So don't look at the big process as this massive thing that has to be done overnight, but break it down into small steps. A little bit this week, a little bit the following, and 6 to 8 weeks from now, people will have their plan in place.
Hey, you're listening to Consider This program, and along with us tonight, a guest, good friend of mine, Jon Braddock. You can find out more about him at mylifeandwishes.com. Go there. And here's the deal. When we look at the 5 critical elements, the 5 areas, Angi, that we've identified that can really make it or break it for people financially. Your life after work, the annual tax plan, the investment playbook, the things that happen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And last but not least is the legacy plan. And, there are few places that I know where you can go and have an organized approach to that end-of-life planning, you will. And I think what Jon provides is great. We've got a few of his books left in our office, Angi, I'm pretty sure. So if you call Angi at 800-928-4001, we can still get you a book for perhaps, depends on the number of calls. When they're out, they're out.
Yeah.
But don't forget you can email Jon as well and go from there.
One last question. Do you have any advice, like say how to approach older parents who don't necessarily talk about their finances, even though this would be a great idea for you, like as the beneficiary? How would you bring that up?
Oh, what a great question. And, I hear that so often, and it's hard because my parents are in their mid to late 80s. And it's a tough question. how do you get them to talk about it? Well, we're coming into the holiday time, and this could be a good time because we are going to be hopefully together with our families, depending on what COVID allows, right? But, I think the best thing to do is to just have a very calm conversation saying, look, when something happens to one of you or both of you, we're going to have to figure things out, which can be very time consuming and costly, frankly, because you live on the other side of the state or the other side of the country. And so we want to make it as efficient as possible. Have you guys written down kind of all your wishes? Have you logged this stuff somewhere? Start with the probing questions instead of saying, hey, mom and dad, we need to know this information now. Take it, a much softer, smoother route. Have you talked to someone? Have you written this stuff down? Who is your financial advisor? Who's your estate planning attorney? At least, is there someone we can contact, God forbid something happens, so that, we can ease our burden? Because as I speak with people and they say, well, why should we get this planning done? My advice is this. I just ask a question. What do you want the experience to be like for your family after you're gone?
Well put, my friend.
And I think
none of
us want it to be bad.
Yeah. No, but nobody wants it there. When we look at and I don't know if you know this, Jon, or not, but we've got it set up so we can be the trustee for people's trust this year. The Financial Enhancement Group can, as a corporate trustee, if you will. And one of my big objectives and reason I push so hard on that is to take care of people when they become incapacitated, not just when they're gone, but it really is to be your advocate during your life, and then the person who helps get that life, the legacy, the wishes out. But it doesn't. Nobody can do that. Me, any other trustee, nobody can do that unless we know what your goals and objectives are, what your wishes are, and I think this is an easy way. Jon's got a program put in place to take baby steps. There's no revenue share. I don't make any money off of what Jon does. I'm just telling you, I think this is a good program for people to look at. My wishes. MyLifeandWishes.com, pardon me. And you can reach out to Jon there. Buddy, we certainly appreciate you having you on the show.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And just to tie off that last thing about talking to parents, if you're not sure how to talk to them, grab a copy of my book that Joe mentioned, which is called Click Here When I Die. It's not a Debbie Downer. It's my sort of irreverent sense of humor on a serious topic. And it's a short read. And if they read that book, they'll probably take action.
800-928-4001. We'll be right back. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. We hope you enjoyed Consider This Program this week. There's a lot of things that we want to cover. That's why we've done the show for 22 years. That's why we write the newspaper column every week and provide you the show notes. And just in case you missed a radio program, make sure you go to yourlifeafterwork.com and find out about our Next Steps program. Here's the deal. In 90 minutes, we're going to figure out and we're going to help walk you through those 5 critical elements, the things that we talk about during the show. So our process, the family focus process, starts with you and your vision, and then we take you through those 5 areas. And I want to remind you one more time. I think James Clear just put this so succinctly. Success is never dependent upon one thing, but failure can be. And what I've learned in 32 years of running a financial planning company, of being a professor at Purdue University, of becoming a certified financial planner, what I have learned is any one of these 5 areas can wreck it all. Your life after work, which some people call retirement planning, I just tend to find that most of us don't watch grass grow, right? We have something else we want to do in life. The common thing is, Joe, I don't know how I got it all done before, right? I mean, it's, there's so many things that come into our retirement years, if you will. So your life after work, the annual tax plan, that's something that's got to be done before the end of the year. The third is the investment playbook. How do we deal with the volatility of this crazy market? Fourth is life happens. It's the good and bad and ugly of life. It's the things that may only happen to you once. That is, we take care of 1,100 families across 31 states we have to deal with on a monthly basis. So use our checklist. Let us help you with that. And the fourth, then, of course, is the legacy plan. It's how I want to leave behind what matters most to me, my values, my memories, my assets, how I want to transfer that to the next generation, make sure that my wife's taken care of, but making sure that other people are taken care of as well, including our charities and our church. We put this show together to give you those insights and the guidance, but what we're going to invite you to do is to come into our office for what we call a next steps meeting. One of my planning team will sit down with you, and we're going to spend 90 minutes where we're going to cover those 5 critical elements. We're going to give you things that you need to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in your future, and if we choose to partner together, things that FEG will do for you. So go to our website, yourlifeafterwork.com, or call Angi at 800-928-4001. Again, that's yourlifeafterwork.com, 800-928-4001. I look forward to meeting you. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed the show.